You have to be reading your Bible. I can't tell you. I always say this. I don't know how it changes us. It just does. The sickness, the tragedy, the death, the kid on drugs, the whatever. God wants to use, well, where did God come from? And if he created us, who created him? And how is that we tend to look at every battle and every problem in this natural realm. Like what I see, but see, we don't get it here. Because we think Jesus asking him in our life just means, I get to go to heaven.
Okay, good morning. Good morning to those of you here in Phoenix. We are really glad you're joining us today. We are in our summer series called Live Different. We are studying the book of Proverbs. For those of you that are watching us online, apps, Roku, or YouTube, any way you found us, we're glad you're joining us today too. If you want to know more about our Bible study, you can go online to womensbiblestudy.com. You can get handouts for today's lesson. You can get past lessons, catch up on our series that we've been doing. We always have guest speakers. There's lots of fun stuff on there for you to do. So we have been in this study of Proverbs. We're talking about two different paths, wisdom and foolishness. Here's our first screen. I thought this actually kind of made me laugh. Wisdom is the reward you get for a lifetime of listening when you would have preferred to talk. I thought that was great, Doug, because it's like so true. It's like we want to talk, we don't really want to listen that much. But throughout Proverbs, we talked about two different paths. And here's what we learn on the next screen. A wise man learns by the experience of others. An ordinary man learns by his own experience, and a fool learns by nobody's experience. Now, we've talked a lot up to this point about wisdom, and what we're going to learn about today is how fools do not look at other people, see their disastrous lives, and learn lessons from them. So today we're going to talk about those who refuse the call of wisdom, and we call them fools. Now, most of us, I always say that I've probably lost you right now, and you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me because I'm not a fool, because this is how we look at fools. Here's our first picture. We assume that's someone that's foolish. He's homeless, he's sleeping on the streets, he did something in his life to just become, foolish, and that's what we, in our minds, we think that's a foolish person. Here's another one, next picture, a girl in jail. It's like we look at her and we're like, well, I'm not foolish. I'm not going to jail. I make good choices. So she did something to end up there. How about our next one? Drug addicts. Yep. Snorting coke. We're thinking, well, I'm not like her. I mean, she would be really foolish because she does that. How about the next one? An alcoholic, if people who are just drinking all the time, and we're like, well, that's not me. And then for the next one is this one, the 15-year-old pregnant girl. You're like, okay, that's just, how foolish is that? Okay, so we look at wisdom and foolishness, and we think that is our picture of foolishness. But you might be surprised to know that that's not really true. That people can be very wealthy, they can have great jobs, and they can still be very, very foolish people. John Ortberg writes about this very successful man. In one of his books, I can't remember what it's called, When It All Goes Back in the Box or something like that. It's a really, really good book. But anyway, he talks about a man who's very foolish because he's very rich, but he makes very foolish decisions. He says a story like this. Once upon a time in Silicon Valley, there lived a very important man. He logged in 12 to 14 hours a day, and then he worked a lot of times on the weekend. He went to Harvard School of Management, where he got top honors. He qualified in his chosen field. He joined a lot of different board of directors. He was on his own board of directors. He wanted to expand his contacts. He just took leadership courses from all different people because that's who he was. When he wasn't working, he was preoccupied with his occupation. That's just what he could never, ever rest. He found a 40-hour work week so pleasing to him that he tried to do it twice a week. His wife tried to slow him down to remind him, hey, you have a family at home that needs you. But he kept saying, we're so close. We're just so close. Just, the kids are going, Daddy, why aren't you reading books to us? And Daddy, why aren't you playing games with us? And he kept telling them, as soon as our future is secured, we'll be fine. He knew he wasn't taking care of his body. His doctor told him that there was very serious warnings. He had high cholesterol. He had high blood pressure. The doctor told him to cut down on red meat and chocolate, and he needed to start exercising. So he did a very foolish thing, and he decided to stop going to the doctor. That's how he fixed that problem. One day, his chief operations officer came to him and said, hey, we just can't seem to catch up. We need to join the technological world. So now we're gonna revamp our whole systems and do more computers, and we're gonna do 24/7. That's gonna be our motto around here. But as he was sitting on his computer rearranging the company, there was a microscopic detail that he'd overlooked, and it was an artery that had been as supple as grass was now as dry and brittle as old cement. For more than half a century, his heart had been pumping 70 milliliters of blood with every contraction, 14,000 pints a day, 100,000 beats in 24 hours, all this without sending a memo or giving a performance review. Now it skipped a beat, and then another, and then a third. He gasped for air, clutched his chest, and for a moment was given the gift of blind clarity. Even though he sat on top of hundreds of organizational charts, he realized that he wasn't even in control of his own pulse. Funny thing, thousands of employees on multiple continents would obey every word and feared with fear and trembling, but a few ounces of recalcitrant muscle brought him to his knees. His wife woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, realized he wasn't in bed, was so frustrated, it's like being married to a child. He just won't come to bed. She went downstairs. She saw him at his computer with his head down, and she said, how stupid. He would rather fall asleep in front of the computer. But when she went to touch him to wake him up, she noticed that he was very cold. She called 911, and they said, I'm sorry, it was a massive heart attack. His death was a major story in the financial community. His obituary appeared in the Times and the Telegraph, and it was too bad he was dead because he actually would have loved to have read everything that people said about him. Then came the funeral service. Because of his prominence, the whole country, or whole community turned out. People filed past the caskets and kept saying, he's so peaceful, he looks so peaceful. John Ortberg says, death is nature's way of telling you to slow down. They'd ask the same foolish questions that everyone asks when a very wealthy man died. How much did he leave behind? And the answer is, everything. He left everything behind. That's just what happens when we die. People got to eulogize him. Mostly they talked about his accomplishments. They talked about him, but nobody really knew him. He was one of the leading entrepreneurs of the day. He was an innovator in technology. He was a man of principles. He never cheated on his taxes or his expense reports or on his wife. He was a pillar of the community. He knew everybody and was a great networker. So they made this huge, large marble monolith in his memory, and they wrote on it, visionary, innovator, leader, entrepreneur, and at the top they wrote, success. But when it was dark and no one was around, the angel of God was sent to the cemetery. Unseen and unheard, the angel made his way past all the other tombstones until he came to the man's wonderful memorial stone. There the angel traced with his finger the single word that God had chosen to summarize the life of this wealthy, busy, respectable businessman. Here's our picture. Fool. See, God says this, you fool, this very night your soul will be required from you. See, foolish people aren't just the drug addicts and the alcoholics. It's people that just don't understand that God has a purpose for you, and our job is to live for that purpose. So, fools can be anyone. So don't tune out because you think you're not a fool, because I know I'm foolish on a lot of things, I guarantee you on that. But when it comes to the idea of foolishness, here's what I want to talk about today. Is that when I realize what's in my life that is foolish, how I'm acting, what I'm thinking, all of those things, I have to take responsibility for my own actions. My husband was reading a book. Here it is right here. It's called Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. And he was reading a bunch of things out of there to me, and some of it was so good that I had to use it today, because here's what he learned. That if you're a Navy SEAL, the reason why you're so successful is because you take extreme ownership of your own life. Like, they don't blame others. They're not like, oh, it's my platoon person, or it's my boat failed, or it's my leader. Like, none of that. They just take full responsibility. You know, this is my problem. It's not anybody else's problem. And so I started thinking about that with Proverbs and with me, that it's not so much even our actions which are important, but I think we need to learn how to take full responsibility for our attitudes. I was laughing at Rob. He was reading me parts out of that book. And the next day he woke up and he was frustrated about something. I don't remember what it was. And he had kind of a bad attitude. So I looked at him and I said, you need to take extreme ownership of that bad attitude. And he started laughing and we both laughed. But then I thought, that's probably true. That's true for me. Like every one of us has to look inside of our own life and say, what is my attitude towards my husband or my children or my grandchildren or my boss or whoever? What attitudes are going on in my life that I need to take extreme ownership? Rob was at Costco the other day and it made me laugh because he loves to grocery shop. I hate to go to the grocery store, so he always goes and gets the water and everything we need. He loves Costco's meatloaf. So he filled his cart and he had the water stacked up and a bunch of stuff, and then he put the meatloaf on the top. He was walking out to his truck and he hit a little pebble, just enough so that the cart tipped, everything goes flying off, splat, there goes the meatloaf on the ground. So poor guy, he's cleaning it all up, then he goes back in. He ends up in the same line as before. And the lady goes, why are you back? And he goes, I was driving my cart and I hit a pebble and the cart went over. And she said, oh, so you're blaming the pebble? It's the rock's fault that you did that? And he's looking at her like, what are you talking about? But it's so funny how we can do that. We can have this thing that it's somebody else's fault on why I have the feelings that I do. I get that. This just happened to me a couple weeks ago. When somebody hurts you and you're so shocked first that they do, and then you have all these attitudes that come in, like I'm so angry with them, I'm so bitter, I'm never going to get over it, and all of those things. And that happened probably about 2 weeks ago with someone. And I'm to this day still struggling over it. And I looked at Rob and I said, I don't even think I should teach Bible because I cannot get over this. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm trying really hard. He said, Lisa, this is just going to take some time. But the first thing we have to do is recognize that there's something going on inside of us. And so what I can do is I say, God, here's the deal. I have a really bad attitude towards that person. I'm very, very unhappy with that person right now. It's so deep within me that I cannot get rid of it on my own. So God, I'm going to trust you to get rid of it. I'm going to own it. I'm telling you, I'm not even going to put it aside and say, I don't feel that way. I'm not going to do that. I'll tell you exactly how I feel. And now, God, you have to change me from the inside because I can't change myself. See, the foolish thing is for us to just let it fester and grow and not acknowledge it to God and not talk about it to God. That's the foolish thing to do. The wise thing to do is take extreme ownership of how you feel, even if it hurts. I look back and I say, well, was what that person did to me right or fair? And the answer is no, not in my eyes. But I have to say, God, I understand that, but I'm giving that person to you. You deal with them. But I don't want it to make me so bitter and angry all my life that it affects me. So God, here's the deal. Deal with me. I need to take extreme ownership of me. Now, the reason why you and I have to do that is because I'm assuming most of you are mothers, grandmothers. Some of you even have jobs where you are bosses of people. And you are a leader, regardless of whether you think you are or not, but you are. You're over something, you're over somebody, whatever it is. The question is, what kind of leader are you? Because literally the Navy SEALs have two. Here's the first one. The best performing SEAL units had leaders who accepted responsibility for everything, every mistake, every failure or shortfall. Their best leaders checked their egos, accepted blame, sought out constructive criticism, and took detailed notes for improvement. They exhibited extreme ownership, and as a result, their SEAL platoons and task units dominated. Those leaders would own it. See, that's what I'm saying. You and I, whoever we're leading, what kind of people are we? Are we leaders that are owning our own life, being responsible for our own attitudes and actions, or are we consistently doing what the second team does when they're bad? When a bad SEAL leader walks into a debrief and blamed everyone else, their attitude was picked up by subordinates and team members who then followed suit. They all blamed everyone else, and inevitably the team was ineffective and unable to properly execute a plan. See, what we need to know is that living this life of wisdom, it's like as a leader, sharing wisdom with other people and living out wisdom, you're the most important person on your team. You're the most important person in your household. You're the most important person to your children, to your grandchildren. You just are. We learned this in one of the drills that the SEAL boats do. If you've ever been to Coronado, over by the Hotel Del, if you go to the left out there, they have the Navy SEAL training camp there. And if you go at nighttime, you'll be able to see them out with their boats. They get in those little raft boat things, and then they have like, if they have to go across the rocks in the water, and then they have to go out someplace, turn around and come back. It's like a race. In this particular scene, there was a SEAL Boat 2 always won. They had a great leader. They worked together. He taught them well, and he always won. SEAL Boat 6 was the bad leader. He just was bad. No one really cared. He always lost. So they decided to put leader 2 in Boat 6 and see if that changed. And Boat 6 won, all because of the leader and how he led the team. So whatever capacity you lead in, it's your job and my job to set the tone for the people around us. And if we live lives that are bitter and angry and hateful and vengeful because we can't get over things in our past, then they're going to follow our lead. That's just what's going to happen. So let's talk today about 2 things that in Proverbs that we need to look at ourselves and say, how am I leading in these areas? Am I taking responsibility for this? Here's the first one: gossip. What tone are you setting when it comes to gossip? Do your kids see you on the phone gossiping about your friends or your neighbors or your family or whoever? What are your kids seeing you do during the day? Proverbs 16:28 says this: a troublemaker plants seeds of strife. Gossip separates the best of friends. Proverbs 20:19 says, a gossip goes around telling secrets, so don't hang around with chatterers. Proverbs 26:20 says, fire goes out without wood and quarrels disappear when gossip stops. Isn't that amazing? Solomon, in his great wisdom back when he wrote this, reminds us, thousands and thousands of years later, how important it is to not gossip and to keep our mouths shut. A man wrote, I don't know why this made me laugh. He said, I overheard my mother passing along to my father a newsy tidbit concerning a neighbor. He said, I told her, you shouldn't repeat stories like that to others. He said, Mom, that makes you a gossip. And she said, I'm not a gossip. I'm a news analyst. And I thought, okay, that's a good way to put it, I guess. Here's the problem with gossip. Here's our screen. My name is Gossip. I have no respect for justice. I maim without killing. I break hearts and ruin lives. I'm cunning and malicious and gather strength with age. The more I'm quoted, the more I'm believed. I flourish at every level of society. My victims are helpless. They cannot protect themselves against me because I have no face. To track me down is impossible. The harder you try, the more elusive I become. I am nobody's friend. I tarnish a reputation. It's never the same. I topple governments, wreck marriages, ruin careers, cause sleepless nights, heartaches, and indigestion. I spawn suspicion and generate grief. I make innocent people cry in their pillows. Even my name hisses. I make headlines and headaches. Before you repeat a story, ask yourself, is it true? And is it fair? And is it necessary? And if not, we need to shut up. I realized this yesterday. Someone told me something. And I realized if I told anyone what this person told me, it could possibly destroy this person. It could destroy their ministry. It could destroy everything about them with one word. And I said, A, is it fair? Is it necessary? I don't know if it's true. It's something I heard, but I'm not going to just take someone's word that, oh, did you hear so-and-so said so-and-so? We don't do that. We stop and I give the person the benefit of the doubt and I say, you know what? That's interesting that you say that, but that might not be true. It stops here. We're not going any farther. So I think we have to learn that. This made me laugh. Mildred was a church gossip. She was the self-appointed arbiter of the church's morals. And so people were terrified to come up against her because they knew how she gossiped and talked behind everyone's back. So she made the mistake one day of accusing a new member, his name was George, of being an alcoholic. and he was standing there. All these people were standing around. She said, George, you're an alcoholic. I saw your truck parked in front of the bar all day long last week. And so now that just put the little seed in everyone's mind that George had an alcoholic, struggled with alcohol. So George was a man of few words, and he stared at her and then walked away. He didn't explain, defend himself, nothing. Later that evening, he just quietly took his pickup and parked it in front of Mildred's house and left it there all night. And I thought, okay, that's a perfect way to get back at someone like that. But Proverbs makes it really clear that gossip is so destructive and it's exhausting. Have you ever talked about someone and then went, oh my gosh, I hope no one heard me. And then you have to tell the person, make sure you don't tell anyone I told you. And I don't want this to get out. And then you're wondering if the person behind you heard, or you're wondering if they're good. I mean, it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. We have to choose not to do that. When your friends say, hey, what did Mary say? You go, not really much. Hey, did you hear about Linda? No, but I'm not comfortable listening about Linda. I just am not. And we have to get to that point. Wise people walk away from gossip. Fools just get in and just get in the mix. Here's the second one. How do we work in our life about work? What do we do about work? Because the Proverbs talks a ton about work and putting forth really, really great effort. A lot of times, friends don't want you to get a good job. Friends don't want you to get a good job that pays more, because then you can't hang out with them and drink beer and watch soap operas all day with them. So they don't want you to succeed in life. But you have to take this to heart, because once you start reading Proverbs, you see over and over and over again that it talks about that the sluggard is the lazy person, is the fool. But the one that's wise is the one who gets up and gets things done and works hard. Proverbs 6:6-8 says this, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provision in summer and gathers its food at harvest. Proverbs 20:13 says, do not love sleep, or you will grow poor. Stay awake, and you will have food to spare. Proverbs 20:4 said, a sluggard does not plow in seasons, so at harvest time he looks and finds nothing. So you read that, and if you're reading Proverbs, you suddenly start seeing, wait a minute, I'm sleeping too much. I'm sleeping during the day. I'm not being productive. I'm not getting the house clean. I'm not cooking dinner. I'm not going to the grocery store. I'm not doing these things. I'm just kind of being lazy because I just want to read my book and not worry about anybody else except me. But wisdom said, you can't do that. Especially if you're a leader in your home. There's something about working and putting full effort into everything you do. The problem is who you hang around with. We've talked about that if you hang around friends who are lazy, that when you decide to start working, they're going to want to just pull you down. Charles Allen wrote about a fisherman friend who told him that he never needs to put a lid or a top on his crab basket. He said, because if a crab starts to try to crawl out, all of the other crabs grab him and pull him back down. And that's what happens with friends. If you don't have good, wise friends that work hard, they're going to want to reach in and pull you down and keep you staying down where you'll be lazy and unproductive. Proverbs 12:24 says this, work hard and become a leader, be lazy and become a slave. Lazy people don't even cook, verse 27, the game they catch, but the diligent make use of everything they find. See, we all have choices when it comes to wisdom. What are we going to do with that? And I want to talk about a section of verses that we talked about a few weeks ago. We ended with it and we never really spent a lot of time on it. But here's why. Because in the story that we read at the beginning about the very wealthy businessman, at some point, if we continue down a foolish path, God says that he will turn us over to whatever we're doing. That's just what the way that works. It's this whole thing of sowing and reaping. It's like the guy who goes to church all of his life and he's taught, you don't go rob banks. But you know what? His friends got together and said, hey, let's rob that bank. And they did, and they got away with it, and they made a lot of money. And so he just thinks he's going to be able to do this the rest of his life. But he ignores God, and he ignores God's wisdom. And eventually he'll be turned over, and he'll eventually get caught and go to prison. That's just what happens. The woman who knows what God says about adultery has the affair anyway. God will eventually turn her over to what she's done. She'll lose her family. She'll lose her kids. That's just the nature of this whole thing. Wisdom says, I'm crying out to you. I'm asking you to stop. I'm telling you the right way to go. If you don't, then I'm eventually going to have to turn you over to what you do. Those are scary verses. The teenager who has brought up, wear your purity ring, go to all the purity classes, don't have sex with your boyfriend. But she finds the guy that she loves and she's 14 years old and she starts having sex with him. She knows it's wrong, but she refuses to listen to God, and she's eventually going to get pregnant, and it will change the trajectory of her life. Proverbs 1:23, we'll start here. Turn to my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. Wisdom is saying, I am calling out to you. I am desperately trying to get your attention. Verse 24, but because I called and you refuse, I stretched out my hand and no one paid attention, and you neglected all my counsel and did not want my reproof. See, that's what's so interesting about the Bible. It's like God always gives us a choice. Like, I'm telling you, this is the great way to go. You don't have to, but this is what's going to happen. We tell our kids all this all the time. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. And God does the exact same thing with us. God does everything to make his words known to us. We have church, we have Bibles, we have books we can read, we have mentors, we have pastors. Like, he's given us all these great ways to learn wisdom. God is calling out and he's stretching out his hand to us. Look what it says, though. It says, no one paid attention and you neglected my counsel. Proverbs 11:27 says, he who diligently seeks good seeks favor and grace, but he who seeks evil, evil will come to him. See, if you're out there seeking wisdom, then you're going to find wisdom. But if you're out there seeking bad things and evil things, then trust me, you're going to find them. That's just what Solomon makes sure we know. But look what happens when we neglect counsel. Verse 26, I, meaning wisdom, will also laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your dread comes. In other words, wisdom is going to be like, I told you, you didn't listen. I'm sorry. I have to laugh at you because you just made the stupidest mistake of your entire life. Verse 27, when your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call on me. We'll turn around and be like, wisdom, I need you. Look what he says, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. Now, that should make us stop and listen and question everything that we do from here on out. But here's what I want you to know. Next week, we're going to go to the opposite of that, because the Bible is filled with lots of things. And for this particular section, he's talking about wisdom. Next week, I'm going to bring you the other side of that, because it sounds like if I mess up, God's going to laugh at me, and go on down the road. And that's not true. And I think we'll talk about that next week, because it's important for you to know the other side of that. If you are truly repentant and then God comes in and puts his arm around you and says, let's continue to walk from here. But this person here is someone who wants nothing to do with God, does not want to listen to him. And this is what's going to happen. Verse 29, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, they would not accept my counsel. They spurned all my reproof. So they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be satiated with their own devices. So next week we'll talk about the opposite, but for today it's that whole consequences of sowing and reaping. There was an old farmer, and he plowed. He had an ox and a mule, and they plowed his yard or his fields together. And the ox woke up one morning and he said, "I'm really, really tired, and I think we should just just play sick." And the mule said, "We can't do that. Like, we have a big field that we have to get done." But the ox said, "No, I just want to play sick today." So he did, and the farmer came in and gave him grain and hay and set him all, make sure he was all comfortable. The mule came back from plowing, and the ox said, "Well, did you get much done?" And he said, "Not much." He said, "It's harder when you're not there." He said, we really need you. And the ox said, "Well, did the old man say anything about me?" And the mule said, "No." So the next day, the ox decided to play sick again. And the mule came back that night and he said, "How'd you do today?" And the mule said, "It was really, really hard today." And he said, "Well, did the old man say anything?" And he said, "Well, not directly, but he said he did have a long talk with the butcher." So there you go. Okay, you do stupid stuff, then you're going to that's just that whole sowing and reaping thing. But wisdom's trying to say, if you make your bed, you're going to lie in it. Now, I have kind of I don't even know what time it is. Okay, this might take about 10 minutes. Do you want it? Or because I can stop. Okay, all right. Here's where we're going to go. I want to show you how this works with a story in the Old Testament with the first king of Israel. the Israelites, when they got into the land of Israel, Moses got them out. Remember when let my people go and the Pharaoh and all that stuff comes over. They get into the promised land finally, and God was always their king. But then they decided one day that they want a king, a human king. They don't want really God to be their king because all the surrounding nations had a king. And so God hears that they want a king. And Samuel was the prophet at the time, and God would speak to Samuel to speak to the people. And when Samuel heard this, he went to the people and he said, trust me, you do not want a king. God has always been our king. If you do, this is what's going to happen. Look at 1 Samuel 8:10. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself to his chariots and among his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. Now, look at that. He's saying, if you don't listen to me, if you decide you're going to go ahead and ask for a king, I'm going to tell you right up front what's going to happen. Your kids are going to be slaves to this new king. Look what it says in verse 12. He will appoint them for himself to be commanders over thousands and over 50s. This is war stuff. Do some plowing to reap his harvest. They're going to be slaves in his field. To make implements of war, they're going to work in the shops to make arrows and whatever they made back then, and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers, and he will take the best of your fields and vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his servants. And he goes on and on and on, and he tells them exactly what's going to happen, and they refuse to listen. And if somebody came to you and said, hey, if you want this bad thing's going to happen, wouldn't you think we'd say, nope, we're not doing that? But nope, they didn't do that. If you make foolish choices, Samuel's trying to explain to them, this is what's going to happen. Verse 18, then you will cry out on that day after you get a king, and the king's not going to be nice. You're going to cry to them because the king whom you have chosen for yourself, but the Lord will not answer you on that day because you have rejected him as king. See, that just buys into our Proverbs that, you've been told, and then you say no, and then it's like, all right, you're just going to have to suffer the consequences, and I'm not going to listen anymore. That's where we get this from. Nevertheless, verse 19, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us, so that we may too be like the nations around us, and our king may be judge and govern and go out before us and fight our battles. So God calls a man by the name of Saul. He was tall and dark and handsome, and he was so kingly looking. Everything was beautiful about Saul. He was terrified to become the king, but it doesn't take long for him to become very arrogant, and he refuses counsel and wisdom. And when he does, he would have to eat the fruit of his own devices. We see this in 1 Samuel 15. The first thing that God told Saul to do was go to the Amalekites, which was a wicked town, wicked people. They wanted nothing to do with God. And Saul was to go in with his army and wipe them out. He says this in verse 15. Samuel said, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people. Now listen and pay close attention to the words of the Lord. Samuel was saying, Saul, do you understand what I'm saying? This is really, really important. Go strike Amalek, completely destroy everything that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. That was his job. Go in there and do it. But look at verse 9. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of, I decided I like to teach with him because he's kind of cute. Okay, look what he did. They spared the king, Agag, and then the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and everything that was good, and they were not willing to destroy them entirely. But everything that was undesirable or worthless, they destroyed completely. It was the absolute opposite of what God just told Saul to do. But he did it anyway. He's like, no, look what he says. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel and said, I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned away from following me and has not carried out my commands. So Samuel said to Saul, and Saul said to him, blessed are you of the Lord. I have carried out the commands of the Lord. So Samuel comes to Saul, and Saul's like, Samuel, it's so good to see you. This is so awesome. Look at me. As he's carrying the sheep. I've everything God has commanded me, I've done. Look what he says in verse 14. But Samuel said, wah, bah, bah. What then is the bleating of the sheep in my ears that I hear? Okay. He's like, really? Saul, do you not see that I actually see the little lamb? I hear them making all those noises. Like, I'm not that stupid, but in Saul's mind, he still did what he was supposed to, even though he didn't. The Lord sent you on the mission in verse 18 to destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are eliminated. Why in the world did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Saul says he obeyed, but look down at verse 22. Samuel said, has the Lord as great a delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obedience to the voice of the Lord? In other words, so many people, we go to church and we throw our tithes and our offerings in, and we work with the homeless and we do all those things, but we refuse to do what God says to us. And look what he says in verse 23. For rebellion is as serious as the sin of divination, fortune telling. When you and I disobey what God calls us to do, God says it's as bad as and serious as fortune telling. That's how strong of wording this is. God says, I just want you to obey me because I have the best things for you. Saul had the greatest job of king, but here's our screen, the purple, yeah, there you go. Fools refuse to listen to God and do what he says. And that's what all Proverbs is about. When you refuse to follow what God says, you are a fool. A young woman went to her pastor and asked for help resolving an issue. Something she wanted to do, probably like, hey, can my boyfriend and I live together? Hey, can I go to this party and get drunk? Whatever it is. She knew the pastor would disagree because she says she's a Christian. So he wrote 2 words on a piece of paper. And he said, I want you to take these 2 words, go into the sanctuary, look at them, pray about them for the next 10 minutes, and cross out one of them. And here was the words. No, Lord. If you cross out no, then that leaves the word Lord. And if you say you're a follower of Jesus and you say you're a Christian, that means he is Lord of your life, which says, God, my life is yours. I will go anywhere, do anything, what you say I do. That is what being Lord means. If you cross out the word Lord, you're just saying no. You're saying, no, God, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. Those really are our choices. We have to realize what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus says this in John 14:15, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. As Christians, that's our job. That's what we do. We love him. We love his commandments. We want to do it. Foolish people do not get that. Proverbs 12:15 says this, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes. A fool does not care what God has to say. He only cares what he thinks is right in his own mind. I was reading a People magazine about a really famous actor, and he was talking about his kids and raising his kids, and he said, I don't care if they grow up homosexual, heterosexual, transgender. I just don't care. I just want them all to be happy. And all I could think about is, you are a fool, because God has already set down perimeters for that. And a fool says, I'm going to disregard what God has to say and go with what I think. So that's how we'll end. For all of this today, the question we need to ask ourselves is, am I wise or am I foolish? As we look at what foolishness looks like today, that it could be any one of us, but am I making wise decisions? Am I being a leader in my own home? Am I gossiping? Am I working hard? These are things Proverbs tells us, and I think the more we read it, the more we take extreme ownership of our life, what happens is we'll start seeing wisdom here and foolishness just falling away. Father, thank you so much for this book of Proverbs that you've given us. Thank you for the wisdom that you've allowed into our lives. I pray, God, that it'll permeate every part of us and that you will change us from the inside out. God, I pray for those today that are like me, that are struggling with someone who has hurt them. I pray, God, that we will take extreme ownership of that and give it to you, and you will change our inside of our hearts so that we won't feel that way anymore, that we will love people like you've loved and forgiven us. Thank you for these wonderful girls and their love and their care for me. I'm so grateful for each one of them. Thank you, Jesus, for all you do. In your name, amen.
Maybe you're going to struggle every single day of your life with the situation that you have. Maybe you wouldn't yell at your kids, but do you gossip at all the girls? Okay? Maybe you wouldn't wear those skin. But it's so true. It's like, what do people say about Christians? You're so judgmental. As we progress in our relationship with Christ, our lives will change. And now, instead of judging, when you believe the Bible and the Bible alone, I said, that's what we live for, is just this one